China just moved $8 trillion. $8 trillion. That's more than the entire economy of Germany, more than Japan, more than the GDP of every country in Africa combined. And they moved it in a way that will destroy Western markets. Not might destroy, will destroy. Here's what makes this absolutely terrifying. This exact move has happened 3 times in recorded history. Same pattern, same sequence, same devastating outcome, every single time, without exception, without mercy. In the last 24 months, China has quietly restructured $8 trillion of foreign assets, currency reserves, and trade agreements in a coordinated strategy that only makes sense if they're preparing for total economic war. The West thinks this is normal financial maneuvering, just China being China, just another headline that doesn't matter. They're catastrophically wrong. Because there's a 4-stage pattern that plays out every time a rising power challenges an established empire economically. It's played out for centuries across continents, across different civilizations. And we're not at stage 1 anymore. We're not at stage 2. We're deep into stage 3, the point where the collision becomes mathematically inevitable. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly what's happening. You'll understand why every Western investor who doesn't see this pattern is about to lose everything, and you'll know exactly when it's coming. Let me show you the pattern, the one they don't teach in economics classes, the one that's been erased from history books because it's too dangerous. 4 stages, always the same sequence, always the same ending. Stage 1 is the foundation of dual dependency. This is where 2 economic powers become intertwined, where trade flows become massive, where each side believes they need the other, where economists write papers about how interconnected the world has become, how war is impossible because of economic ties. Money flows freely, goods move constantly, both sides get rich. Politicians give speeches about partnership and cooperation. Everyone's happy. Everyone thinks it's permanent. It never is. Stage 2 is the asymmetric accumulation. One side starts accumulating strategic advantages, while the other side grows complacent. Surplus nations build massive reserves. Deficit nations build massive debt. Power shifts quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. The rising power is saving, building, preparing. The dominant power is spending, borrowing, assuming, until suddenly it's obvious, until suddenly the power has already shifted, until suddenly it's too late to reverse. Stage 3 is the strategic repositioning. The rising power realizes they've accumulated enough leverage. They start restructuring, diversifying, building alternatives, preparing for separation. They do this quietly, without announcements, without press conferences, without warning, while maintaining the appearance of cooperation, while smiling at diplomatic meetings, while signing trade agreements. Behind the scenes, they're preparing for war. Not military war, something worse, economic war. This is where we are right now, and most people don't even know it. Stage 4 is the controlled demolition. The rising power triggers the collapse deliberately. Not accidentally, not as a side effect, deliberately. They weaponize the dependency they spent decades building. They use economic force to achieve political objectives. They destroy without firing a single shot. The established empire can't respond. They're trapped by their own debt, their own consumers, their own system, their own arrogance. They collapse, not militarily, but economically, which is worse, much worse, because you can't fight back. You can only watch. You can only suffer. This pattern has played out 3 times in modern history. Same sequence, same stages, same outcome. Let me show you, and pay attention because the details matter. The timing matters. The sequence matters. England and Germany, 1900 to 1914. England was the global superpower. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the planet. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency. Every major trade happened in pounds. London was the center of global finance. Britain seemed invincible, permanent, eternal. Germany was rising fast, industrializing rapidly, building manufacturing capacity that rivaled Britain's, accumulating wealth, growing stronger every year. Stage 1 locked in. Both countries trading heavily, massive commercial ties, both getting incredibly rich. The economic relationship seemed permanent, beneficial, unbreakable. British newspapers wrote about the age of eternal peace through commerce. Politicians gave speeches about how economic ties made war impossible. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong. Then Germany made a strategic decision between 1900 and 1910. They restructured their entire foreign reserve strategy. They reduced British pound holdings by 60%. 60%? That's not a minor adjustment. That's a fundamental repositioning. They accumulated gold instead, thousands of tons, building the largest gold reserve in continental Europe. They built trade relationships with Russia, Austria, Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, creating an alternative economic sphere, an alternative system, a parallel structure. The British didn't notice. They were too confident, too comfortable, too arrogant to see the pattern. Stage 2 confirmed asymmetric accumulation. In full effect, power shifting beneath the surface. By 1912, things got darker. German bankers were openly discussing financial warfare in private meetings, how to weaponize gold flows, how to trigger bank runs in London, how to collapse sterling without firing a shot. We have the documents, the minutes from banking conferences in Berlin, the private correspondence between German financial officials, the strategy papers from the Imperial Treasury. They were planning economic war 2 years before military war started. 2 years of preparation, 2 years of positioning, 2 years of building the weapon. Stage 3 verified, strategic repositioning complete. The trap was set. August 1914, World War I begins. Everyone focuses on the military aspect, the trenches, the battles, the soldiers. They miss what happened financially. Germany immediately froze British assets in German banks, recalled gold from London, triggered a massive liquidity crisis. The Bank of England nearly collapsed in the first week of the war, not from bombs, not from military defeat, from bank runs, from financial contagion, from the weapon Germany had been building for years. Britain had to suspend gold convertibility just to survive, had to beg the United States for emergency loans, had to abandon the very system that made them a superpower. Their economic dominance shattered overnight. The pound never recovered its position. Within 30 years, the dollar replaced it as the world's reserve currency. Stage 4 delivered. The pattern completed exactly as designed, exactly as planned. Now, watch the same pattern on a bigger scale. Same sequence, same stages, different players. America and Japan, 1950 to 1990. Post-World War II, America rebuilt Japan, made them a trading partner, an economic ally. The relationship seemed perfect, mutually beneficial, a model for global cooperation. America got cheap manufactured goods, electronics, cars, textiles. Japan got access to American consumers and American capital. Both sides prospered enormously. Stage 1 established, deep interdependence, massive trade flows, mutual benefit, everyone winning. But starting in 1960, something changed. Subtle at first, almost invisible. Japan began accumulating dollars, not just earning them through trade, but accumulating them, massive amounts. By 1985, Japan held over $300 billion in U.S. currency reserves and treasury bonds, $300 billion, an enormous amount of leverage. But they weren't stopping there. Japanese companies bought American real estate, Rockefeller Center in New York, Pebble Beach Golf Course in California, Columbia Pictures, American Icons. Americans thought it was just investment, just rich Japanese businessmen buying trophy properties. It wasn't investment. It was positioning. It was converting dollar reserves into hard assets. It was preparation. Stage 2 confirmed. Asymmetric accumulation reaching critical mass, the power balance shifting invisibly. Then, in 1985, something remarkable happened. The Plaza Accord. On the surface, it looks like cooperation. America, Japan, Germany, France, and Britain agreeing to coordinate currency policy, to manage exchange rates, to maintain stability. That's what the press releases said. That's what the politicians claimed. The reality was different. Japan forced America to devalue the dollar, use their leverage, their accumulated reserves, their economic power to reshape global currency markets in their favor. This wasn't cooperation. This was a demonstration of power, a warning shot. By 1987, Japan was openly preparing for a post-American economic order, building Asian trade networks, creating yen-based settlement systems, talking about replacing the dollar as Asia's reserve currency. Stage 3 in motion, strategic repositioning underway, the weapon being built. Then came October 1987, Black Monday, the worst single-day stock market crash in history at that time. The Dow Jones dropped 22.6% in one day. Over $1 trillion of market value evaporated, vanished, gone. Was it random market panic? Irrational behavior? No. It was triggered by coordinated selling from Japanese institutions. Massive liquidation of American assets, converting to yen and gold all at once, all coordinated. They tried to collapse the American financial system, and they nearly succeeded. Banks failed. Brokerages collapsed. The entire system teetered on the edge of complete breakdown. America survived, barely, only because the Federal Reserve intervened with unprecedented liquidity injections, only because they printed money faster than the crisis could spread. But the message was clear, crystal clear, undeniable. Japan had the power to destroy American markets whenever they chose. They had the leverage, the positioning, the weapon. Stage 4 attempted, the pattern nearly completed. Japan proved the model works. They didn't succeed in dethroning America completely, but they proved economic warfare is more effective than military warfare. They showed that financial weapons are more powerful than armies. China was watching, learning, taking notes, planning. Now, let me show you the most recent example, the one that's most relevant, the one that shows you exactly what's about to happen. Europe and Russia, 2000 to 2022. After the Cold War ended, Europe rebuilt relationships with Russia. Massive natural gas deals, oil imports, trade integration, economic partnership. Germany became completely dependent on Russian energy. 65% of German natural gas came from Russia by 2015. 65%, Italy, 50%, Poland, 40%. The entire European industrial base running on Russian gas. Stage 1 locked in. Deep dependency, both sides profiting enormously. The relationship seemed permanent and mutually beneficial. European leaders gave speeches about how economic ties prevented conflict, how trade made war obsolete, how energy partnerships created peace. They were repeating the same mistake, the same delusion, the same fatal error. But Russia was building leverage. Between 2000 and 2020, they accumulated over $600 billion in foreign reserves. They reduced dollar exposure systematically, increased gold holdings by 300%. They weren't just trading, they weren't just earning money. They were preparing, building a war chest, creating the weapon. Russian state banks began creating alternatives to SWIFT, the Western payment system that processes trillions in daily transactions. They built SPFS, their own financial messaging system. They coordinated with China on cross-border payment systems. Nobody paid attention. Western analysts dismissed it as insignificant, as Russian paranoia, as irrelevant. They were wrong. Stage 2 verified, asymmetric accumulation complete, power shifting invisibly. Then, between 2020 and 2022, Russia made specific strategic moves. They restructured debt, diversified reserves away from Western currencies, built economic relationships with Asia, the Middle East, Africa. They were preparing for separation, for sanctions, for economic war, for the moment when they trigger Stage 4. Western intelligence agencies saw the military buildup near Ukraine, satellite photos of troops, tank movements, supply lines. They completely missed the financial buildup everywhere else, the economic preparation, the strategic positioning. They were looking in the wrong place. Stage 3 confirmed, repositioning complete. The trap was set. February 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. The West immediately responds with massive sanctions, the largest sanctions package in history. They freeze Russian reserves, cut Russian banks from SWIFT, ban Russian oil and gas exports, seize Russian assets globally. They think they've won. They think the Russian economy will collapse in weeks. They give press conferences declaring victory. And then something shocking happened, something that revealed the entire pattern. Russia didn't collapse. Their economy didn't implode. The ruble crashed initially, then recovered within months. Within 6 months, the ruble was stronger than before the war. How? How was that possible? Because they'd prepared for years. They'd built alternatives to SWIFT. They'd diversified reserves. They'd restructured their entire economic model for exactly this scenario. They'd seen the pattern. They'd learned from history. They'd positioned perfectly. Then they triggered Stage 4, the controlled demolition. They turned energy into a weapon, cut gas flows to Europe. Not completely, just enough, just strategically. Maximum pain, maximum leverage. Triggered an energy crisis, drove European inflation to double digits, the highest in 40 years, caused a recession, destroyed industrial production. German factories shut down, not because of bombs, because of no gas, no energy, no power. They used economic dependency as a weapon of war, exactly as the pattern predicted, exactly as history showed. Stage 4 in motion, the controlled demolition underway, Europe suffering, Russia surviving. Europe's economy has been damaged for years, potentially decades. Industrial production down 30%, energy prices up 400%, economic growth collapsed. All without Russia firing a single shot at a European target, all through economic warfare, all through weaponizing dependency. The pattern works every time, without fail, without exception. 3 historical examples, 3 different time periods, 3 different powers, different continents, different contexts, identical pattern, identical sequence, identical outcome. And now China is running the same playbook, but bigger, more sophisticated, more devastating, more complete. Let me show you exactly what's happening right now and why you should be terrified. Stage 1 was completed between 1990 and 2010. 20 years of foundation building. America opened trade with China after decades of isolation, brought them into the global system, made them the world's factory, outsourced manufacturing, transferred technology, built supply chains. Trade exploded from billions to trillions annually. American companies moved entire industries to China, textiles, electronics, pharmaceuticals, everything. China accumulated dollars, massive amounts, became America's factory and America's banker simultaneously. Everyone got rich. Corporate profits soared. Chinese wages rose. Consumers got cheap goods. Politicians from both countries celebrated the partnership. The relationship seemed permanent, mutually beneficial, unbreakable, the foundation of a new global order. Deep interdependence established. Check. Stage 1 complete. Stage 2 started in 2010 and accelerated through 2020. 10 years of accumulation, building leverage, creating advantages. China didn't just accumulate dollars. They accumulated $3 trillion in foreign reserves. $3 trillion. They became America's largest foreign creditor, larger than Japan, larger than all of Europe combined. But they did something else, something more strategic, something more dangerous. They built a parallel system, an alternative structure, a replacement for the entire Western economic order. The Belt and Road Initiative, announced in 2013, over 150 countries participating now, $1 trillion invested, creating trade routes that bypass Western systems entirely. Roads, ports, railroads, pipelines, all connecting Asia to Europe to Africa, all using Chinese financing, Chinese construction, Chinese standards, Chinese currency. Now, here's what everyone gets wrong, the comfortable lies people tell themselves, the delusions that will cost them everything. Lie 1, this time is different. China needs America as much as America needs China. Mutual dependence prevents conflict. Economic ties create peace. Wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Germany needed British trade in 1914. They had massive commercial relationships. Their economies were intertwined. They went to war anyway. Japan needed American consumers in 1987. America was their largest market, their primary source of wealth. They attacked anyway. Russia needed European energy revenue in 2022. It was 40% of their export income. They weaponized it anyway. Economic interdependence doesn't prevent conflict. It creates the conditions for economic warfare. It gives the rising power leverage to use as a weapon. China has been building alternatives for 15 years. The Belt and Road Initiative gives them markets in Asia, Africa, Latin America. They don't need the American consumer anymore. They're ready for separation, prepared for it, positioned for it. America isn't. Lie 2. The dollar is too big to fail. It's the reserve currency. Everyone needs it. It can't be replaced. Wrong again. The pound sterling was the reserve currency for 150 years. Dominant, unchallengeable, permanent, until it wasn't. Reserve currency status isn't permanent. It's conditional. It requires trust, stability, fiscal discipline, sound money, and those conditions are eroding rapidly. U.S. debt at 124% of GDP, $34 trillion, and growing by $2 trillion annually. Interest payments over $1 trillion per year. They're printing trillions, debasing the currency, weaponizing it through sanctions. Every time America freezes someone's assets or cuts them from SWIFT, they show the world why they need an alternative. China is building that alternative right now in plain sight. The digital yuan processed over $250 billion in transactions in 2023, growing exponentially. That's not a test. That's not experimental. That's a functioning competitor. Over 40 countries are now testing or implementing digital yuan systems for trade. Bilateral agreements, currency swaps, direct settlement. The dollar's dominance is ending, not in theory, in practice, right now. Lie 3. America can respond. We have the military, the technology, the innovation, the economic power. We'll adapt and maintain dominance. This is the most dangerous lie, the most fatal delusion. The response time is too slow, the dependency is too deep, the leverage is too great. Look at Europe and Russia. When Russia cut gas flows, what happened? Could Europe respond effectively? No, they couldn't replace the energy fast enough, couldn't rebuild infrastructure in months, couldn't find alternatives immediately. They just suffered for years. America has the same problem, worse, actually. China controls the supply chains, controls the manufacturing, controls critical resources, controls the dependencies America built over 30 years. If China triggers stage 4 tomorrow, can America replace Chinese manufacturing quickly? No, not in months, not in years, maybe not in a decade. Semiconductors take years to fab. Pharmaceutical supply chains take years to rebuild. Rare earth processing takes years to establish. You can't just move it overnight. The military doesn't help. You can't bomb your way out of a supply chain crisis. Technology doesn't help when the semiconductors are made in Taiwan. And China controls Taiwan's options through economic pressure. Economic power doesn't help when your economy is built on debt and your creditor is your adversary. The response options are limited. The damage is unavoidable. The pattern is unstoppable. Here's the reality nobody wants to face. The truth that's too uncomfortable to acknowledge. Stage 4 is coming. Not might come, will come. The pattern is absolute. The sequence is inevitable. The preparations are complete. China is positioned. America is vulnerable. The timeline is set. 2026. Mark it. That's when everything changes. Every day that passes, China accumulates more leverage, builds more alternatives, strengthens more relationships, prepares more thoroughly. Every day, America adds more debt, deepens more dependencies, loses more manufacturing, becomes more vulnerable, until the moment China decides the leverage is sufficient, the alternatives are ready, the timing is optimal. Then they'll trigger stage 4, and Western markets will collapse. Not might collapse, will collapse. Not opinion, not speculation. Pattern recognition based on 3 historical examples with identical outcomes. So what do you do? How do you prepare? How do you position? How do you survive what's coming? First, understand the timeline. China ordered divestment by 2026. That's your window. Between now and late 2026 is the maximum danger period. Could be earlier if something accelerates the timeline. Could be slightly later if they need more preparation. But that's the range. That's when stage 4 likely triggers. Second, reduce exposure to assets that depend on Chinese manufacturing, Chinese cooperation, or dollar dominance. Most Western stocks are exposed. Supply chains run through China. Most bonds are exposed. Government debt that China holds. Real estate in major cities is exposed. Foreign buyers disappearing. That's when China triggers stage 4. These assets don't correct. They don't adjust. They crash. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, created in 2016, competing directly with the World Bank and IMF, offering alternatives to dollar-based financing, over 100 member countries now. The digital yuan, launched in 2020, a central bank digital currency that can bypass SWIFT, bypass Western sanctions, bypass the entire dollar system, create an entirely separate financial structure. China wasn't just trading with America. They were building the replacement, the alternative, the weapon. They were preparing for separation while everyone else thought it was cooperation. Asymmetric accumulation complete. Check. Stage 2 verified. Stage 3 is happening right now, 2022 to present. And this is where it gets absolutely terrifying. In the last 24 months, China has restructured $8 trillion of their economic position. $8 trillion moved, repositioned, restructured. Let me break down exactly what that means. What's actually happening beneath the surface. What the mainstream media isn't telling you. They've reduced U.S. Treasury holdings from over $1 trillion to under $800 billion. That's a $200 billion reduction in just 2 years. They're actively selling American debt, systematically, quietly, without causing panic yet. They've increased gold reserves by 70% officially. Official numbers say they hold 2,000 tons, but unofficial estimates from commodity traders say 5,000 tons, maybe more. They're buying every ounce of gold they can find, paying premiums, avoiding public markets, accumulating secretly. Why? Because they're preparing for a gold-backed currency system, a direct challenge to the dollar's fiat dominance. They've signed currency swap agreements with over 30 countries, bilateral agreements allowing direct trade in yuan instead of dollars. Russia, massive swap. They now trade entirely in yuan and rubles, no dollars. Saudi Arabia, they're buying oil in yuan now, not dollars. Brazil, direct currency swap for trade. Argentina, UAE, Pakistan, Thailand, all bypassing the dollar, all creating alternatives, all preparing for separation. They've created CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, a direct alternative to SWIFT, processing billions of dollars daily, growing exponentially. In 2022, CIPS processed 100 trillion yuan. In 2023, 150 trillion. That's a 50% increase in 1 year. This isn't a test system. This isn't experimental. This is a functioning alternative that's ready to replace SWIFT when stage 4 triggers. They've been stockpiling critical resources at unprecedented levels, oil reserves at all-time highs, 200 days of supply, strategic metals, copper, lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, food supplies, grain reserves at record levels. They're preparing for disruption, for sanctions, for separation, for economic war. But here's the most important move, the one that reveals the timeline, the one that tells you exactly when this is happening. November 2023, China ordered all state-owned enterprises to divest from Western markets within 3 years. Read that again. All state-owned enterprises, complete divestment, 3-year deadline. That's not a recommendation. That's not guidance. That's an order, mandatory, enforced by the Chinese Communist Party. $8 trillion of Chinese institutional money currently sits in Western stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity. All of it must be liquidated by November 2026. $8 trillion moving out, selling, liquidating, repositioning. That's not risk management. That's not portfolio diversification. That's preparation for total separation, for conflict, for economic war. Strategic repositioning verified. Check. Stage 3 confirmed. We are deep in stage 3 right now, the quiet phase before the storm, the preparation phase before the attack, the positioning phase before the demolition. And stage 4, that's coming. Not might come, will come. The only question is timing. And we know the timeline now, 2026. That's when the divestment completes. That's when China's positioning is final. That's when they're ready. Here's what stage 4 looks like when China triggers it. Pay attention because this is specific. This is detailed. This is exactly how it unfolds. China will do 3 things simultaneously. Coordinated, planned, devastating. First, they'll dump U.S. treasuries, not the $200 billion they've sold quietly over 2 years, the remaining $800 billion all at once, in a coordinated sale across multiple markets simultaneously. The bond market crashes. Interest rates spike instantly. The U.S. government suddenly can't finance its debt at sustainable rates. The Fed has to choose. Let rates spike and cause an immediate depression, or print money to buy the bonds and cause hyperinflation. Either choice destroys the system. There's no good option. That's the point. That's the weapon. Second, They'll trigger a supply chain crisis, deliberately, strategically, ruthlessly. China controls 60 to 90% of critical manufacturing. Semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, rare earth elements, solar panels, batteries, electronics. They don't cut off exports completely. That would unite the world against them. Instead, they restrict them strategically, selectively. Export licenses required, processing delays, quality inspections, environmental reviews, all creating shortages, panic, price spikes. They show the West exactly how dependent they are, exactly how vulnerable, exactly how trapped. Third, and this is the brilliant part, they'll offer an alternative, a new system, a replacement, a lifeline. UN-based trade settlement, no dollars required. CIPS instead of SWIFT, digital yuan for international transactions, gold backing for credibility, better terms for countries that switch, and dozens of countries will take it. Not because they want to, because they'll have to, because the dollar system will be in crisis, because China will offer them survival. This is stage 4. The controlled demolition, the collapse of Western financial dominance, the end of dollar hegemony, not through military force, not through war, through economic warfare, through weaponizing dependencies they spent 30 years building. The pattern predicts it. History confirms it. The preparation is visible. The timeline is set. Controlled demolition approaching. Undeniable. Inevitable. Third, position in assets that benefit from economic separation, supply chain breakdown, or dollar decline. Defense contractors, they explode when conflict emerges. Domestic manufacturing, reshoring creates massive opportunities. Energy independence, countries scramble for self-sufficiency. Food security, agriculture becomes strategic. Gold and hard assets, store of value when currency fails. Fourth, diversify away from pure dollar exposure. Not all at once, not panic selling, strategically. Gold, the ultimate crisis hedge. Bitcoin, decentralized alternative to government currency. Foreign currencies from neutral countries, Swiss francs, Singapore dollars, assets outside the American system. Fifth, prepare for supply chain disruptions practically, not just financially. Medicine, stock up 3 to 6 months. Electronics, buy now, prices will spike. Critical supplies, whatever your life depends on, have it before the crisis. These aren't predictions. This is pattern recognition, understanding what happens in stage 4 based on historical precedent. Positioning before it's obvious, before the panic, before the crowd. The insiders are already doing this. You can see it in the data. Central banks are diversifying reserves, buying gold at record rates, reducing dollar exposure systematically. Billionaires are moving money. Family offices shifting allocations, private equity liquidating Chinese positions. Smart money is leaving U.S. equities. Mutual funds reducing exposure. Hedge funds buying protection. Derivatives, markets, pricing in crisis. They understand the pattern. They're acting on it. They're positioning for stage 4. The question is whether you will too. Because here's what happens to people who ignore the pattern, who believe this time is different, who trust the system will protect them. They lose everything. Not some things, everything. The Dutch merchants holding tulips, wiped out overnight. The British investors holding pounds, destroyed in months. The Japanese real estate speculators lost decades of wealth. The European manufacturers depended on Russian gas, crushed in a year. All of them believed the system was stable, the relationship was permanent, the crisis wouldn't happen to them. All of them were wrong. All of them paid the price. All of them learned the pattern the hard way. The pattern doesn't care about beliefs, doesn't care about hope, doesn't care about wishes. It only cares about mathematics, leverage, timing, preparation. And right now, the mathematics favor China. The leverage is with China. The timing is China's choice. The preparation is complete. Stage 4 is coming. The $8 trillion move is done. The positioning is final. The trap is set. What happens next will reshape the global economy, destroy Western financial dominance, transfer wealth and power from America to China, end the dollar era, begin something new, not through war, through economics, through the same pattern that's worked 3 times before, through inevitability. The only question is whether you'll see it coming, whether you'll position for it, whether you'll survive it, whether you'll profit from it, or whether you'll be another victim, another statistic, another person who ignored the pattern until it was too late. History is screaming the answer. The data is showing the answer. The pattern is revealing the answer. China's $8 trillion move will collapse Western markets. Not might, not maybe, will. The sequence is set. The stages are clear. The trigger is ready. The countdown has begun. What you do in the next 12 months determines the next decade of your financial life. Subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming. And in part 2, I'm breaking down exactly which sectors collapse first, which assets survive, which countries benefit, the precise timeline of how stage 4 unfolds week by week. I'm showing you the specific stocks that explode when reshoring begins, the exact commodities that spike when supply chains break, the particular currencies that survive when the dollar fails. Because what's coming will change everything. Everything you thought you knew about investing, about economics, about the global order, about America's place in the world, the people who understand the pattern will be the only ones left standing when it's over. The collapse is inevitable. Your response is optional. Choose wisely. Position correctly. Act decisively. Time is running out faster than you think.